All right. So you can build apps with almost no friction to their UI, with zero effort authentication, with support for images, videos, highly interactive, near real-time experiences. And you can even get things like sharing and notifications that are typically native to mobile. And you can do that mostly without building a front end. I'm Lars Wikman, and this is how we do it with Untitled. But actually, that's how I start my YouTube videos, and this is a conference talk. So this is not pre-recorded, it's actually live, there's no editing. So you're gonna see me mess up, you're gonna see me stumble, so that can be novel. That gets cut in editing when I do YouTube. But hello, ElixirConf Africa. It's very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And today I want to talk about implementing chatbots with Elixir. So just first a bit of intro to what I do. So I run a small consultancy called Untitled, where we are a few consultants doing Elixir development for an assortment of clients. I also help some companies, primarily smaller companies, but all kinds, find Elixir developers. So if you're the tech lead or a CTO at a company that's looking for Elixir developers, you can reach out to me. I'm sure I can help. I have a pretty decent network. So that's about it for the company. I also write this blog, untitled.io, a newsletter. I have the YouTube channel, and you might hear me on Beam Radio along with a set of much more impressive people. So I recommend giving that a listen if you haven't. So that's it about me. I would say we should talk about messaging clients. Almost everyone has a whole slew of messaging apps on your phones. It's not enough with one. It's never enough with one. You might have WhatsApp, you might have Signal, you might have Telegram. I think there was something called Wire at one point. Also for work, you might have Slack, you might have Teams, you might even have something else. And then there's Discord, that's primarily used for social part. We all use messaging apps a fair bit, and they are really low friction. You wouldn't call someone on the phone these days unless you wanted something serious or really wanted to chat for a long time. Typically you send a message. Even my mom has figured out that it's normal to send a message, and even my mom has figured out how to use the more advanced features like images, videos, and emoji. So that tells me something about how easy it is to get started with messaging apps. There's almost no friction to sending, and there's very little imposition to the recipient when they get a message. They can usually deal with it later, they can usually ignore it, they can tailor the notification settings. So it's a popular medium for a reason. Now, chatbots are our way of being able to program these highly accessible user interfaces. So some of these services offer APIs that let us send a program user or let us control a user by software. So that means we can send messages to users, we can receive messages to users, we can send responses. And in some cases you have to do something weird and custom. I don't think Signal, for example, supports bots, but Telegram, Slack, Discord, they all support bots to a pretty significant extent. And then you get nice APIs for getting the information, getting the updates, and responding. Some of the advantages of these bots are, for one thing, you can get started really quickly and you don't need to build out a UI. Building UI takes time, almost regardless of how you do it. Live view is very efficient, for example, in the Elixir space for building UI, but it doesn't cost nothing. Like, you still have to design it, you still have to build it, and about the UI is the messaging app. Someone else built it for you, someone else optimized it for you, and you get authentication essentially for free. The people that are using the messaging app are already logged in. They are already authenticated. You get your unique identifiers, you get some information like names and stuff that you can use to refer to the user. And it becomes very easy to do authorization based off of this, because you have authentication for free. And sometimes you're dealing with groups. For example, Telegram has a lot of support for groups. That can be a part of your authorization model. So controlling where information goes is pretty easy in many cases. And especially with Telegram, but also possible with others, you don't actually have to necessarily deploy a server to be able to try your ideas. So I will be showing you some things I've built, and they are all running on my local machines here and there, and I'm reaching them through a messaging app. So it really lowers the barrier to trying interesting things without needing to build a ton of UI to get it going. So there are downsides. For one thing, this is probably the big one, you require the user to have the app and use the app. And the messaging space is very fragmented. So if you built your bot for Telegram, Telegram is popular in some countries. Signal is popular in some countries. iMessage is super popular in the US, but almost not used here as far as I can tell. And it all varies. So there are some adoption limits for sure when it comes to messaging apps. It's like, maybe you can get super popular in Brazil suddenly because you've selected the app that's popular there, but you'll never make any inroads in Sweden or whatever. Now, the advantage of not having to build a UI is also the disadvantage of not having control over the UI. You have some APIs that are super flexible, like Telegram, for instance, allows you to sort of send controls to the user. You can show them buttons and options. So you have some flexibility there, but it's still limited to whatever the client can handle and to whatever the system offers. You're also dependent on the app and whatever APIs they offer in general for what you can do. You might not be able to get all the information you want about a user because it's not offered by the app. And in the long term, you're also depending on the company behind the app to make good choices on your behalf, because you're building, like if you're building a product, there's a danger there. If you're building an experiment, the danger is very small. But you're building in a dependency on an entire company as sort of critical infrastructure. Now, I have some demos to show, and I'll definitely be using Telegram for those. I find Telegram very nice to work with. They have a good bot API, it's very flexible, and there's a good Elixir library that I'll reference later. Anything I do here, these demos are fairly simple in what they do with regards to chat. So anything I do here should also be doable in at least your company Slack and Discord, and potentially in others. And Telegram supports more than text. So we're going to be looking at images. They do support video. I don't have a demo of that. Telegram even supports very convenient audio snippets, and then it supports additional things like documents. And Telegram has a very, very big feature set. They've been around for a long time, and they've been constantly building apparently. But yeah, audio snippets, something we'll look at as well. All of these become options for input into your Elixir system and allows it to do new and interesting things. So I think these are some demos that are good examples of this. So hold on, I'll just show you my Telegram. let's see, I won't be able to look at you right now because I need to do typing, but let's start with text. A beautiful, glowing bottle of Elixir. I want it to be purple, magical, and photorealistic. So this bot is hooked up to the Stable Diffusion machine learning model. So it gives us this nice purple bottle given this prompt. And we get the response as a reply to our text message. We can see that it knows which message triggered this generation. And I think that's a pretty nice experience, pretty nice UI. Now, if we want, we can also send an image. So I'll grab one of my profile images, and we can add a caption, and it will be incorporated. So now I want a really cool picture, so it's Cyberpunk Elite. And I'll send that one off. Now this one can be a little bit dodgy. Hopefully the demo gods are kind and this will work for me. This uses the Stable Diffusion image-to-image functionality, and it will take an image and remix it based on the prompt. And there we have a very cyberpunk-ish remix of my face. I think it's interesting. I think it's also a nice demonstration of multiple inputs. It's an image and it's text. Now, the next one, a bit different machine learning model as well. I'll record an audio snippet, so now you'll hear me read from a script here. The Beam is a fantastic virtual machine that implements some high-level abstractions such as the actor model. It is reliable, consistently low latency, and incredibly concurrent. We'll just send that off to the bot, and it confirms that it heard me. And it sends back a transcript. So we get a nice transcript out of it. And this is done with OpenAI's first actual open source piece of AI, Whisper. Yep. So that's a few things I've experimented with. There's very quick and dirty implementations, I can promise you that. Behind the scenes, you don't want to see that code. Also, I want to note the AI models used here, the machine learning models here, are all open source. So if you want, you can access and use them. Unfortunately, I didn't get them running in Elixir's NX. I don't know the machine learning space nearly well enough to get that done. I've poked a little bit at the people behind NX, and I think they're very keen to get that going, but I don't know how. The point of this is not so much that connecting machine learning models to chatbots is particularly novel, impressive, or like, ooh, I did something so cool. The effect is cool. It's a good demonstration of what it means to take some inputs and get something out of it. The practicalities of this is that I'm shelling out to Python, so I'm calling commands behind the scenes. And the only reason I got that set up is because I have a history as a Python dev and sort of know that space. The ML tooling in Python is messy. It was a bit of a process, but essentially with some grit, anyone can do it, assuming you have a sufficient GPU. I just barely have enough GPU to do this. But yeah, the point is really that it's an interesting demo because it shows, for example, the voice to transcription means that it's very simple to make a voice note with Telegram. If you have the Telegram app, you'll see that it's super, super easy to just send a voice clip. And I don't think I could make a smoother or faster UI with a web app than sending a piece of text, sharing an image in this way to just get something going, just send something to a machine. I've even built a project where I save notes by just sending them to a Telegram bot. because it's one of the easiest way to just capture what I'm thinking in the moment and pass it on and get it out of my head. There's also something fun about how close it is to a terminal experience, essentially. It's, you send a command, you get a result. I think there's something there which maps well for us techies as well. And in all fairness, like the Stable Diffusion thing gives a terminal interface, and I just exposed that further to the bot. So yeah, it's almost like a command line interface. Now, beyond writing messages to the bot, sending pictures and audio and stuff, you can also have the bot act independent of what the user is doing. After the user has interacted with a Telegram bot, you are free to send messages whenever, as long as you've saved sort of the ID of that user. And that means you can build things that trigger off of other events from your Elixir system. So maybe you have some particular data sources that you're tracking, or you have some APIs that you're following. Maybe you're getting webhooks from somewhere. You can pass those on to your bot and take action and communicate to your user. I've done a number of experiments, not just with bots, but with like nerves and that sort of thing. So I've poked around with a ton of different interesting libraries for input and output. And I would say, if you want a nice little project to experiment with and try this stuff, here's some ideas that I have sort of top of mind. Using Quantum and the iCalendar libraries, you could fairly easily build yourself a daily agenda and have your bot produce that in the morning and send it to you. If you want to publish photos on a site, you can do that in real time with just a live view and sharing a photo from your share sheet straight to the bot in Telegram. If you want to capture links to read later, similarly, you can just pass them to your bot, and then the Elixir system behind the bot can pull those down, scrape them, use Floki to parse out all the relevant text and just build a reading list for you to use later. If you access the Hacker News API, you can pull that for new updates and check what are the contents of the current topics on Hacker News, what are the contents of the comments. Are people talking about Elixir? And then you can get a message whenever they're talking about Elixir, and then you can go there and you can argue, and you can waste colossal amounts of time arguing on the internet, which is all we really want to do, right? One method I'm using for the Nerves newsletter, I'm not using that with a chatbot, but I'm using it for building the newsletter, is to pull resources from GitHub. So using the GitHub API to pull down information about the repos I'm following that relate to the Nerves IoT framework. And I gather all the releases and tags and stuff and build sort of a release log from these many different projects for that newsletter. And you can do something similar with the repos that you're interested in and the projects you want to follow. And you can get that custom in your own bot. You can build this little assistant for yourself. You can also start experimenting with chat ops. I know that was a hype thing for a bit. Don't know if it's that popular anymore, but a lot of companies are using some degree of integrations with Slack and stuff, and you can either do that for yourself or for your Slack, for your company. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Now, I don't think chat is the solution for everything. For example, whenever you need sort of an admin UI with lists and create and read and update and delete and all of this normal sort of admin crud things, there are limitations to having a chat as your only UI. Maybe you could do it well in Telegram, but I think you'd find it limiting. It's also something where, for example, a Telegram bot doesn't really fly in a corporate environment. It doesn't seem reliable from a privacy or security standpoint, even though it might be. There's a fair bit of encryption in many of these chat systems, but overall, the perception of that is iffy. A lot of companies would do a Slack bot for many different types of functionality, so your mileage may vary. So I think there are both technical and people reasons that you should consider whether a chatbot is appropriate for the thing you're building. Now, I think it's a fantastic platform for personal experimentation, like build bots for yourself. If you like the UI of working through a chat app, build bots. It's a great way to learn, great way to experiment, great way to try ideas. And why Elixir? Like, you can do this in Node, right? You can do this in Python, I guess. Wouldn't that save me a lot of time when working with the machine learning? Like, not necessarily. So chatbots are fundamentally actors. They receive messages, they send messages, they're doing message passing. And this maps very cleanly to Elixir. And the beam, fundamentally, is about providing reliable and consistent low latency and near real-time performance, soft real-time performance, as well as massive concurrency. So that means you have a bot that's snappy and responsive, and a bot that will scale when you add many users. Now, I want to show some code as well. Right now, we've just been talking sort of big picture. What about all these bots? And I made a bot specifically for this. So let's go into some code. So first of all, we need to get the dependency. I'm using the Viskyang GitHub library, and they don't publish to Hex, so this is using the GitHub and tag for reference for downloading, but it works about as well as Hex. And yeah, fundamentally, this is a Phoenix project. I just did mix Phoenix new and said I probably don't need a database. But we add to our supervision tree in our application.ex this telegram.poller, and we make sure that it has this bot setup, which is called leif.bot, and Leif is the name of the project. So whenever it detects new messages, it will invoke this bot. Now, I'm also using system.get.env to get this environment variable, so that we are treating our secrets respectfully and not building them into our application. So let's look at the bot module. So this is sort of the boilerplate. This is getting started with the bot module, where we are doing use telegram.chatbot, which gives us a particular behavior of bot that has a bunch of conveniences. There are also lower level APIs if you want to control everything. We are setting a session TTL for 5 minutes, and we're going to use that further down here in the init callback. In this init callback, we are returning a RUPL of OK and the state and the session TTL, and this is how we start the bots according to the contract that telegram.chatbot provides. One moment, just need a drink. I'm putting my bowl in the middle of my code. I shouldn't put water in your code. The next part is handling a message, and you do that by invoking handle update callback. So this is an example of the function head we're using to match out, let's see, no, over there, to match out a bunch of pieces from this information. We're also getting the token, which is the API token, and the state. So it's very similar if you work with gen servers or live views or channels. It's very similar. And then you return a thruple of OK, the updated state, and the new time to live. In this case, we're returning the 5-minute TTL, which means every time we're receiving a message, this particular bot, so I should have mentioned, the init means the way that Chatbot works, Telegram.chatbot behavior works, is that it will start a bot session as a process for every specific user. And the TTL is for how long that session will be alive. So the process will shut down after 5 minutes in our case. 5 minutes of inactivity, because in this case then we set a new TTL whenever we get a message. So that resets those 5 minutes. And this is the actual code in the handle update that we want, because we want to respond to the user and let them know that we received their message. In this case, we send back welcome using the telegram.api.request function. So it takes the token and then it can call different Telegram APIs. We're also setting this process up to be tracked by Phoenix presence, and this is particular to what we're doing with this particular bot, and we'll get into that later. We're saving when the user was seen and what the user's ID is. This example is a bit cut short. I'm also saving some other things, you'll see. But that's essentially what we're doing. We're responding to the user and we're acting on it. We're sending something into our system to act on this information. And this all lets us do live view, because no talk is complete if you're not doing a live view. So we are building a live view. We are subscribing to events from Phoenix PubSub to get those updates about the things happening to the channel. So Phoenix presence goes through Phoenix PubSub. And we're also refreshing people, which just means we're getting our initial list of active users. And whenever we're getting this handle info presence diff, we are refreshing the list again. So whenever the presence information changes, we are updating it. The particulars of that function is that we call presence.list on this chat channel, and then we sort the users by recency. So when were they last seen? Did they last talk to us? And we put that as an assign, so that live view, assign on the socket so that live view can render. So that's essentially what we do. And as Apple would say, I can't wait to see what you do with it. But in their case, they're usually talking about like months from now, what will you do with these new devices and APIs? I mean, it's right there. Like if you have Telegram, please go to the bot. You can either use the QR code or you can use this name, Talk Demo Bot, or this link. I know you can't click the link in the video. And you should be able to talk to the bot and maybe send it an emoji or two to let me know how I'm doing. I know this is going to take a little moment before you get started with this because there is a delay. Oh, the first one has shown up. We have some initials. I'll also open my Telegram and just send something through so that they're not lonely. So we have SM and we have me. And yeah, as you can, oh, I can't point. So as you can see, people show up here. And this is a live view app overlaid on top of this presentation. So I think it's a neat trick, and I like this kind of real-time interactivity. So some of you have pictures. In that case, we're doing some extra work to download the picture and make it part of the presentation. We're also doing some things, like I didn't want to show everyone's names, so it's doing initials. And if you don't have multiple names set up in Telegram, it will do question marks. So yeah, a few different details that I had to skip for the sake of fitting code on the slides. Now, if you want that code, you can go to GitHub, lavik/leif, and all the code is available there and it's ready to experiment with. It's very easy to get set up with a bot on Telegram. You can just talk to the botfather bot and ask him to create a bot for you. That's literally how it's done. And then you get an API key, and that's all you need to get started with this code base. So yeah. Now, if any of you send emoji, I want to see some emoji getting sent. Oh, I see a hand. Yeah. So, oh, this worked. Like I tried it with 2 users, so I wasn't sure how it's gonna fare in the long run. I'm happy with this. All right. And I guess that's it for me. Thank you so much for having me.